I'm explaining a film from 2020 titled Vicious Fun. Spoilers ahead. Enjoy the content. The next scene shows a man who is a horror film writer. He is Jack, who is talking on the phone with his partner. While at the same time, he was conducting an interview with Joel, who is a horror story writer in a magazine. Joel allegedly critiqued Jack's film work, which he believed was less interesting or not memorable at all, and Jack then requested Joel for guidance on writing a solid horror picture. Joel then encouraged him to produce a film on irritated taxi drivers, and Jack ordered Joel to leave immediately. To cut a long tale short, Joel was now at his apartment, recording writing ideas. Soon later, Joel ran into his roommate, Sarah, who was joined by a man who had recently begun dating her. Joel waited for Sarah in his apartment before coming out. Joel saw that his date Sarah's car was still parked in front of his apartment, then a moment later the man left the location of his apartment. Joel followed the man in a cab, suspicious. Joel's aim when he arrived at a nightclub was to learn more about the man who was dating Sarah. Joel approaches the man while wearing a secret recording recorder. Joel eventually learned about the man who claimed to be named Bob after getting to know him. Joel also began to entice Bob with chatter about women. Bob was quickly sucked in and informed him that he was dating Sarah, whom he believed was a bad lady. Sarah, on the other hand, informed Bob about Joel and how he was a loser, therefore she wanted to leave the flat right now. Joel, who heard Sarah's statement about him, then immediately said that maybe Sarah liked him, only that she felt like she didn't want to. Hearing Joel's overconfident statement, Bob left him, while Joel spent his time drinking until he was drunk. Unsteadily walking, Joel headed to a payphone and bumped into Carrie. After Carrie left, Joel contacted Sarah with unclear words, knowing that he was really drunk. Joel vomited because he was so intoxicated, and it struck the public telephone, causing it to be damaged owing to the amount of vomit he had. Stumbling, Joel attempted to walk to a restroom, but he had obviously entered a warehouse by mistake. Joel slept out in the warehouse, unaware that he was sleeping there. Without realizing it, the club had already closed. Joel awoke from his coma and attempted to escape the warehouse. However, Joel inadvertently overheard a group of 4 men and a lady discussing something. The group was led by a man named Zachary, then there were his men, Mike, Hideo, Fritz and finally Carrie. Joel is suspected by the gang to be Phil, one of them. Then Zachary told Joel to come in and join since Joel, thinking he was Phil, had been waiting for him. Joel wanted to be honest and say he wasn't Phil, but he got into that groove since he was already afraid. When Joel joins the group, Zachary greets him cordially, despite the fact that he has not yet recognized that Phil is not Joel and Joel is not Phil. Zachary also urged Joel to tell tales about himself. First, Joel claimed to be an addict, but after realizing that everyone in the group was vicious murderers, Joel made up a story using the horror film screenplay he had written earlier. Joel admits that he is a taxi driver who likes to torture his female passengers, just like a womanizer who cannot see beautiful girls. Finally, after the introductory session, they took a short break. Joel felt relieved and intended to run away. Not to mention he had time to run away, a new problem arose. It turned out that the person who was late to the group was Bob. Joel was startled to learn that Bob was a member of the cruel killing squad, and after being probed by Bob, his actual identity was eventually exposed. Bob stated that Joel was not Phil. After that, Zachary simply let Joel go, rather than him dying ridiculously at the hands of the psychopathic killers, but Mike refused to let Joel just leave without teaching him a lesson. After all, he already knew about the existence of the psychopathic killers, and Zachary was eventually slaughtered to death by his own comrades. Then, without their knowledge, the carnage occurred. Joel would leave this cursed place. Thanks to Carrie, who pretended to kill Joel, whom she brought into a room and then locked it, for saving him. Feeling annoyed, Bob also plans the next murder with the 3 remaining members of his team, accompanied by music while dancing casually. Meanwhile in the room, Carrie explains specifics to Joel about the 4 psychopathic killers. They are the ones who are accountable for 12% of all unsolved killings in North America. The first is Hideo, a chef who serves processed human flesh that has been made as sumptuous as possible, who is also a cannibal and a monk for psychopaths. Mike is then compared as a monster who has emotional issues with his mother figure. The concentration is on college students, and he enjoys killing them while having sex. Then there's Fritz, who has no heart and doesn't care about anything or anyone. He's like a demon in a human body. Aside from that, he enjoys taking notes on the targets he will kill and dressing up as a clown. The last one is Bob. You could say he is the most dangerous figure. Bob is a sociopath who is highly skilled at seducing partners, and killing them on the first or third date. Bob also has an IQ of 180, making him the only one of his 3 friends who is exceptionally adept at integrating into normal culture. Bob may even disguise himself to become any profession by altering his identification. To cut a long story short, the psychotic killers began carrying out their plans in accordance with their respective responsibilities. Hideo, who has the responsibility of getting into the kitchen through an air duct, must confront Carrie, who has also prepared to slay the psychopaths alongside Joel. After successfully cutting off Fritz's finger, Carrie immediately attacks Hideo, who was tricked by Joel, who pretended to have been killed by Carrie. Finally, for a moment Carrie managed to kill some of the psychopaths. Long story short, Bob, Mike and Fritz left the club. However, before leaving, they contacted 911 to report a murder event. They framed Joel and Carrie in order to make them scapegoats for Zachary's death. When the cops arrived, they promptly detained Joel and Carrie. Meanwhile, Bob, Mike, and Fritz are watching the show while keeping an eye out for Joel and Carrie. When Detective Doyle arrives at the police station, he listens to Joel's account but does not appear to believe it. Meanwhile, Carrie informs Detective Hollins of an impending attack, but the detectives do not believe her. Finally, the 2 detectives called their partner, Officer Tony, to discuss what they would do next with Joel as well as Carrie. Detective Doyle advises that Joel and Carrie be held in a holding cell until the police can complete an identification at the crime site. Then Detective Doyle informs Hollins that Joel wishes to borrow the phone in order to call Sarah. Joel then warns Sarah to be wary of Bob since he already knows who Bob is. Sarah, however, refused to believe that the guy she loves was being insulted and instantly hung up the phone. They were then placed in separate cells but face to face, where they conversed and it was observed that Joel was choking from a nosebleed caused by smacking Carrie's head. The next day Bob comes to the police station disguised as a special detective named Jack Felder, to meet a pair of killers. Joel responded similarly when Bob arrived in the jail hall, claiming that Bob was the murderer. And Bob is wearing a false mustache to disguise himself because going undercover is his specialty. One of the investigators was upset with Joel for making fun of his mustache. Bob quickly took advantage of the opportunity to trash Joel, and then Bob requested some time alone with the detainees from the investigators. He fled the prison after warning the 2 inmates to keep their tongues hushed. The scene moves to Officer Tony's room, where he is suddenly brutally killed by Fritz in his clown makeup. It wasn't long before the power went out, so Detective Doyle went to check it out. Only Detective Hollins and Bob remained disguised. When the moment comes for Detective Holland to face his demise, Bob murders him. Meanwhile, Carrie eventually unlocks the holding cage and releases Joel. Bob, Fritz, and Mike eventually make their way to the holding cells to kill Carrie and Joel, but they're not there. Carrie was finally able to open the front entrance of the police station, and she swiftly pulled Joel out. Meanwhile, Carrie is determined to finish off the psychopathic killers. First she kills Mike with all her might. It didn't take long for Carrie to kill him. Meanwhile outside, Sarah was seen hurrying to the police station. She was banging on the door. Fritz finally noticed her arrival. So he enticed Sarah to come inside. Then, when Carrie turned on the power again, Sarah was astounded to find Fritz immediately behind her. Sarah ultimately defeated Fritz till he was wounded, thanks to the martial arts movements she had learnt. Shortly after, Joel arrived at the police station, which startled Sarah. In the middle of the stress and turmoil, Carrie begged Sarah to wait outside. Then Carrie instantly murdered Fritz, but Bob arrived from behind and stabbed Carrie many times. With his courage, Joel tried to protect Carrie by hitting Bob with the telephone. But Joel had to be stabbed by Bob's knife into his hand. Joel did not remain silent. He attacked Bob again until he fell unconscious. Joel took this opportunity to take Carrie out of the police station, outside where Sarah was waiting for them in the car. Then Joel put on the gas and collided with Bob, who was in front of them. In brief, when the three of them arrived at the hospital, the doctor immediately began treating Joel and Carrie, who had been gravely hurt. Joel and Sarah appear to be waiting for Carrie, and when Joel goes to the restroom, he discovers bloodstains. Joel was taken aback when he saw equipment with a bag carrying a change of clothing in the locker area where the bloodstains lead him. Then Joel dashed to the room where Carrie was being treated, only to discover that Bob was already there, preparing to murder her. Spontaneously Joel shouted for Carrie to wake her up. They finally worked together to fight Bob. Finally they managed to paralyze Bob and he died at the hands of Carrie, by thrusting a knife many times into his stomach. After everything was finished, Joel took Carrie out of the hospital, smiling smugly at Sarah who was sitting waiting. The film concludes with Joel as Carrie's partner, and the two of them working together to eradicate crime. That's all the recap. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you want to stay updated with recaps of our latest films. Your support would be appreciated. I hope to see you next time.